everyone. Welcome to the latest episode from the Lessons from the Playroom podcast. I have with me today an incredibly special guest. She's never been on this podcast series before, which kind of blows my mind. And I'm so excited that finally we get to have a conversation with this incredible person, which I'm going to introduce here in just a minute, to talk yet again about bibliotherapy, but bibliotherapy from a totally different perspective than how you might think about bibliotherapy, really from the perspective of a tool for co-regulation, attachment, and safety, which hope your mind's already getting super excited here. So I have with me, for those of you that are able to visually see, you might recognize this beautiful person's face. For those of you that are listening, I have Tammi Van Hollander with me. And for those of you that are not familiar with Tammi, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of background on her. She is a renowned speaker, trainer, clinical social worker with over 25 years of experience. She specializes in attachment, sand tray play therapy, and sensory integration, holds a Master of Social Work from the University of Pennsylvania, extensive training from the Family and Play Therapy Center in Philadelphia. I did not know this about you, Tammi, that you were a certified advanced trainer for the Nurtured Heart approach. Awesome. And founding board member of the World Association for Sand Therapy Professionals, which, listeners, I will say, I know we're talking about bibliotherapy today, but sand tray is another one of Tammi's sweet spots, and we'll touch on that. She has published works that include Casey's Greatness Wings and the Bibliotherapy Toolkit, which we're going to talk about today. 100+ creative and playful story-based intervention. She created Casey's Greatness Sticks and Cards. She teaches virtual sand tray classes. She co-taught the inaugural sand tray therapy class in China, and she has delivered a TEDx talk called Stories in the Sand, Healing Trauma, Anxiety, and Grief. So listeners, if you have not if you're not familiar with this TEDx talk, please go do a little Google search and watch this. It's a phenomenal talk. So Tammi, you're finally here. Yay.
I'm here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited and grateful to be here.
Yeah, like I said, in my head, I'm like, gosh, what an honor that you're on the podcast, and there's so many other topics that could easily have conversations with you about. And I love also today that we're going to focus on bibliotherapy in a whole new way. So
Mhm.
love it, love it, love it. So can I just jump in?
Jump in.
Okay, so books. Why books, Tammi?
Right. Well, I was trained very strictly in client-centered play therapy. And in client-centered play therapy, you don't use books. Books were never a part of any of my training. And I love to share this story because many people in the play therapy world have a very similar story as to mine, is that it was my first Association for Play Therapy conference, and I was at the Self-Esteem Shop. And Dee Dee, who is no longer there, she had a book for everything. And when you would ask Dee Dee about a book on a specific topic, she would open it and she would read it to you, and her inflection. And if it was too long, she would make it shorter. Or if it was too short, she would make it longer. And I was amazed by the power of these books. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful perspective and way of being able to have this felt sense of safety, to be able to not feel alone, and to just be in relationship through these books. And once Dee Dee started introducing me to books, I just started getting more and more books. And I have different learning issues. I struggle with reading. So it's really interesting in terms of just bibliotherapy. And within the Family and Play Therapy Center, my training was, we actually had a specific talk time, and then we moved into the client-centered play. So we would often use the books during the talk time and then moving it into client-centered. And so that's really how my love for bibliotherapy came about, recognizing that I can use bibliotherapy and client centered in a way that does not have to feel so directive and top down. So that's really how what opened the door for my love for bibliotherapy and children's books.
Awesome. And you just said a phrase that I want you to go with, because one of the things that I know that's different about how you
Mm,
approach bibliotherapy, because you said the word top down. So I want you to explain this, because I think a lot of bibliotherapy typically is top down, but
yes.
you're trying to do this bottom up approach. Will you expand on that a bit?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, when we are thinking of top down, we're thinking it more cognitive, right? A psychoeducational tool. So, certain kids who may have anxiety or perfectionism, right? They may do really well with a top down approach. Like these are the kids that want to please you and they have all the tools. And then whether there's different activities that are very much on the agenda of really that reasoning and that learning. And when we're looking at top bottom up, with many of us in the play therapy world do, there's many play therapists who do top down as well, but being trained in the bottom up approach, I often love to use Bruce Perry's 3 R's that we're thinking of, the regulation. We first need kids to be able to regulate before they can be in relationship with us, and then they can reason. So when I started using books, really recognizing for many kids, the books are the regulation tool. The books, just bringing them in, and especially during the pandemic when we were doing telehealth, these little ones were bringing in their books and they were reading, and we would read a line back and forth, right? Games of reciprocity, polyvagal, and we're getting them in this comfort of them sharing the books they most love and what do they love about them. So we're trusting the process and we're following the child's lead within that. So what really came into with this book and this bottom up approach, recognizing that books, as well as other things that we can be talking about, act as a co-regulator. And it's our rhythm, it's the parent reading it, it's the different sensory pieces that we can talk about that create that sense of safety. So we can regulate the body, they can feel safe in relationship with us, and then they can do that higher level of reasoning when that's needed. So that's really how I like to look at all my work. I think we can't do this work without having a bottom up approach.
Can I just like highlight something that you just said that I just love so much? I just love the idea of it as the tool that almost it's not even necessarily about the book per se, but it's really a relational tool for that co-regulation, which I really do think is probably a paradigm shift in thinking for some of our listeners, Tammi, who,
Mhm.
when they think about bibliotherapy, it is more of a, oh, like you said, my client has anxiety, so let's find a book about anxiety and let's talk about this character's anxiety and let's talk about if you feel similar or not and all of this. And it's more of that sort of processing that way, which, yes, that's beautiful and important, but you're just adding this whole other layer of, yeah, but how you read the book.
Mhm.
To read the book. Do you read the book? Do you both read the book? Do you go back and I'm like, it's very exciting.
Yeah. And I think, when we're looking at that, it's not, so it isn't just the content of the book, right? So within, I have many books in that are labeled within my waiting room. So I'm not one who has a specific agenda, right? I'm client centered. So although I may have these books, a book or an intervention or a prompt, it's always an invitation. So we never ever force anyone to do, a child to do anything. So when, I apologize, there's some people loud outside, but so when a child is coming in, right, what are other pieces that are going to create the sense of safety? So it's not often just the book as a co-regulator, right? So maybe it's us making a fort with flashlights that were reading the book. Maybe it's the weighted blanket or a therapy dog if you have it. Maybe, which my favorite thing to do is to bring a big blanket and pillows outside under a tree to be reading the book with all of the sensory pieces that are, making our brains come alive and our bodies come alive. So, yes, there's a part of the book that's important, but it's also what are all the pieces within the space that create that safety to really create that those cues of safety for that child, right? And within the relationship with the parent and caregiver and with us and the child to be able to do it.
And I'm picturing what you're sharing, and it also sounds like for a child where intimacy might be really scary, that to also have this external thing where some of the focus can be on this external thing while all the safety is being created of just um how important that might be for a child where that even that sense of too much intimacy or too much eye contact or too much face to face or too much togetherness might feel so overwhelming, but we can be together in this experience while we're looking at something else.
Yeah.
That's just such a beautiful image of.
Yeah, I mean, and when we look at that, I mean, at that image and the intimacy, and right, what you're also talking about is safe psychological distance. And that's the power of play. The power of play is stories, hearing their story. And so for them to be able to identify, right, with the characters and to feel safety. And for us to rather having a top-down approach or that we are more staying within this curiosity of it and curious in terms of what they're liking about it. What are they know? I mean, kids, it's amazing. Every time I read books with children, they notice different illustrations and different things that I would never have noticed before. And I think that's the cool thing, that if the child is picking the book or you have these books, or as a therapist, you may feel like, oh, this could be something that is really helpful. Then when they're going into the playroom, we may suggest something in terms of talking about the book, but it's amazing how much within staying client-centered, that book resonates so much in them. It begins to be a part of their story, and the characters in the book become part of their story. And that's part of still staying within that part of the play.
Mhm. I have a curiosity question that just popped into my head as you were talking about how one of the ways that you might use it is to bring in a book at the beginning of a session, and then it sort of moves more into just a child-centered, more type of play experience. My guess is, and this is just my curiosity, do you see the themes from the play, I mean, from the books or some of the characters from the play then come to life in other ways than afterwards when you shift from books over into the play? Like the play then is an extension of the book in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. And especially because they're excited by the book and they identify with the characters, and that they could then add their own and they get to add the next level. And it's just, it's really cool to trust the process for the child, and the book's either going to resonate or it's not. And if it's resonating with them, it does become a part of their play. And right, we talk about the relationship. When we talk about this idea of there's nothing scarier than a child being alone in their feelings. So to have the book that validates that, to have us within relationship that, and the parent that they've read it together. So I think there is this piece of also when there's trauma and when there are hard things for all children, parents don't know what to do. So to be able to read this together brings this beautiful connection of I'm here with you.
So beautiful. I love how excited you are about this topic. It's contagious. I love it.
I get excited about anything, play therapy, children, or I mean, because I just think we have the best job in the world. And I leave my sessions and, just with goosebumps. And I'm just like, wow, the kids give us so much more, I think, than we could ever give them. And it's just amazing. And I think these books are just yet another piece, like yet another tool, right? You talk about us being the tool and the toy of the playroom, and it's yet again another one. Jess Stone will always talk about just another tool, and it's just another one to deepen it. They're either going to resonate or they're not. And if they don't, then they don't. And that's okay.
So, I want to shift the conversation just slightly. I know we're
Sure.
going to go a little left brain here for a moment.
Yeah.
I do think it's important for us to differentiate because there are a couple different types of bibliotherapy. So as
Mhm.
getting into wrapping our brain around this, the difference between developmental bibliotherapy, therapeutic bibliotherapy, and play-based bibliotherapy. Will
Yeah.
you talk us through those and then we can.
Sure. So when we're looking at developmental bibliotherapy, we're often seeing that used in schools and with guidance counselors, and they are a bit more top down, and there's an agenda and they're teaching. And then bibliotherapy is using books therapeutically, right? So we have that. But then how do we expand on it to do play-based bibliotherapy? So how do we use play and expressive therapies and sand and all of these things that we know, right, works for children, and being able to trust the process through a playful lens and an expressive lens to really be able to incorporate bibliotherapy that way.
Okay, so I want to get practical.
Yeah.
Do you introduce the idea of the books, or do you just have the books available and then you use them as the child just naturally gravitates towards them? How do you bring it into the process?
Yeah, such a good question. So I'm really fortunate because I do have like a separate room that's kind of like a talk room before going into my playroom. So at first, we may do a check in, like something that was thumbs up, something that was hard, or just a little check in. And if something is coming up and the child, if it's not the parent's agenda, right? It's the child's agenda. I was bullied at school. This was so hard. Oh, wait, I think I have a really good book on that. You want to read it? And the amount of times they often say yes. So it's like, and then we'll go and I'll be like, oh, there's a couple of these books. Which one do you think looks good? So I'm like that all the time in terms of even with sand tray. I'm a big sand tray person. So even if a child is, creating a scene and it's like they're trying to find a fence or something, like without them even saying anything, I'm bringing over all my traps and fences just for them to have. Like I'm not saying, oh, use it, but feel like one of my gifts of doing this so long, and I think, Lisa, you probably would agree of your gift too. Like when you've been doing this work for as long as we have, there is this intuitive nature and energetic flow where we can be so energetically aligned with the client that the book or the different things, you just like, I'm just automatically doing it. And I'm not thinking about it as a teaching model or with my left brain. There's just this intuition. And the amount of times that I do that, rather with a book or with a play activity, I don't get a lot of resistance because I feel that my attunement with the kids are so deep and that I've developed that trust that they're going to go with it. Like, sure, there's plenty of times that they don't and they're not interested, but I think there's something with that attunement, and your clients enough that like this is their thing. Like this is a kid who does love books, that we're able to look at our client's strengths and to be able to go to what they need, right? Whether they need that high energy stuff, they need the art stuff. Where are we? So we're following their lead of what they want, and then we're just kind of bringing in, sprinkling these other pieces that can also act as these co-regulators for the child to just deepen their work.
Yep. Um, I don't know if this is true for you, but for me to get there, in case there are listeners that are like, I want to get there,
Yeah.
um, it was a lot of getting out of my own head and a lot of getting out of my belief system of what I think I should be doing because of what I learned or something I read in a book or whatever it is. And to recognize that everything in a space is available as a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can be present with myself and the child and attune, then anything becomes helpful,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it
100%.
doesn't have to be this sort of agenda driven, script following, whatever, whatever, whatever. Because if we know what the goal is, anything can be used to facilitate that. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say, whether it's the book, whether it's the sand tray, whether it's a puppet, whether it's a whatever, like anything can be brought in as we know who the child is, we know what's of interest to them to facilitate whatever needs to be facilitated in the moment. Is
Yeah.
that, am I in the
Yeah.
ball?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, absolutely, in terms of that piece. I mean, just to share, it's a very first book that's in the bibliotherapy toolbox is The Rabbit Listened.
Okay,
Do you know that book?
I don't. Share.
I always like, oh, everybody has to have this book.
Mhm.
It's the most beautiful book. And it's a book about a child named Corey who knocks down these blocks, and all the different animals come, and the animals tell Corey how to behave. Do we ignore it? Do we stomp and growl like the lion? Do we pretend and bury our head like the ostrich? And all the different animals are telling Corey how to respond to Corey's big emotions, and the whole time there's a rabbit in the back, and the rabbit's just there. And so then all the animals leave, and Corey notices the rabbit, and the rabbit is there, and the rabbit listens. And the rabbit listens to Corey yell and stomp and go through all of these stages. And I had this huge, big bunny stuffed animal. And that's my therapy bunny that the kids use. And this has been the book that I give every single parent to read as a parenting book because they just need to stop and be the rabbit. And like that's what it's about. It's that I love to use that book as an example because look how beautiful it is. It's about listening and trusting the process. And then part of the prompts is for the child, like what animal is your parent, is your teacher, and helping them to recognize how the child sees them, and that they just need to be, we just sometimes need to just listen.
Oh, so good.
So it's a good one. It's a good one to add to your list.
Okay. So, all right, so you just went into the realm of parents.
Hmm.
Before that, you also said that sometimes you'll use books, but just to enhance the relationship. So let's talk about that. Do you bring the parent into the session to do that? Do you work with the parent separately to have them do it as an activity at home? Like how do you think about the incorporation of parents with the books?
Yeah. Well, I often always start with parents in the room, and especially if it's trauma, right, and attachment work. I'm a big believer of the parents in the room, and also a really important piece is almost always a parent and a caregiver will read the book with us together. But then there's many times, I mean, then there's also times when we'll build a fort, and then we'll be doing that without the parent in the room. But I will never read a book to a child um, if the parent has not previewed it. So especially, like the rabbit listened, I should not say never. Like the rabbit listened, books that feel really safe are fine, but they're, books on divorce, even the book The Invisible String, which I love, but The Invisible String goes to heaven. So that may not be comfortable for a parent. So what I'll often do is maybe the session before, or when the parents in the waiting room say, is this book okay? So there's a beautiful book that Beth Ritchie wrote called When a Grown Up Hurts You. And it's about parents also being able to have really big emotions. And I knew that this would be a really powerful book for this child, but I knew that it had to be previewed first by the parent. And so I just had the parent read it, and our session was up, and she just, said, well, thank you. This helped me so much to have the words. So recognizing that, how great to just give these children's books and have the parents read them, um, and that they could both be really done separately. Now, another piece, I will just say a very small part of this, but I am also trained in first play and kinesthetic storytelling with Janet Courtney, and my book, Casey's Greatness Wings, is a kinesthetic storytelling. So the book is done on the child's back. So, what a beautiful way, right? To be able to even deepen the sensory experience and the attachment when the parent is actually doing the story on the child's back. And the child then can be doing it on a stuffed animal or on the sand. So talk about notching it up from books to appropriate touch through then all the sensory pieces. So there's so much. And I am such a big believer of there may be interventions or there may be props that people learn in different trainings, and that nothing is one and done. Like we use things and we expand and we grow, and I think there are just too many just interventions that are happening that aren't like we're following them. Like if one really sticks or something, we're deepening our relationship with them, and that it's really so much about the relationship and where they're going with these prompts rather than a specific intervention that they're then going to just check off the list.
Can we talk a bit more about how you address attachment specifically with
Mm,
this?
yeah. I guess in terms of how I address the attachment piece is that we are really looking for co-regulation, right? We are looking at cues of safety. There are so many things when there are children, right, who have had attachment ruptures. What are the things that we're needing to do to repair? And one of the most beautiful things we do to repair is co-regulation and creating cues of safety. And if books can be one of those cues of safety, how beautiful that is to be able to do it. So I think that that piece of it. Now, I'm also trained in theraplay. So we'll often do something and then do something with the theraplay activities. So we're bringing in all the different pieces that could be different attachment ruptures by using theraplay and also by using some of these books. So I think it's really meeting them where they are. But I think bottom line is recognizing that when there are ruptures, that we're dealing with dysregulated kiddos, right? And whatever that is, whatever those pieces. I mean, this is your wheelhouse, Lisa, in terms of right, what is going to regulate them. So for some kids, they may come in and you may recommend a book, and they're going to throw that book at you. They're going to be completely dysregulated. That book is going to be a cue of danger, everything about that book. So the question's always asked, well, what do you do? And one answer is you don't use it, right? Like, why stress them out? And another one is, oh, well, let me just tell you about this book because, and just share it as a story. So I think everything is always being an adaptation. And there's always a gray area for everything we do, or we couldn't do the work that we do.
I mean, you're talking so beautifully about the attunement, the attunement piece of just being so aware of our clients and what's going on with our clients and when enough is enough or when too much is too much and how do we adapt. My mind is also going to um the parent piece. Do you do anything to establish readiness for a parent to read a book with a child? Which, as I'm saying that, that might feel like such, for some listeners, it might feel like such a weird question, like readiness to read a book. But I'm like, yeah, actually readiness to read a book, particularly if the purpose of the use of the book is around repair or
Yes.
is around attachment. Like what if the parent is not the what if the rupture happened with that parent? Or what if we have a child that doesn't feel safe enough to be in the tent, with the parent? And what an
Yeah.
interesting question when we're talking about reading a book.
Right.
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's such a good question, Lisa. And I think, it's such an important piece to look at. I think about this I do, when I first meet with, I often do a family session first. And one of the things I do is a family sand tray.
Oh,
And I know for many of these parents, the sand tray work could be too deep and that it will no longer be a safe space for the child.
yeah.
Paris Goodyear Brown will often talk about these moms as trauma mamas,
Mhm.
right? So we have a trauma mama with a dysregulated sensory system. And to have them create a sand tray story, which may not be enough of a safe psychological distance because we know that sand is powerful, or the book and those pieces is too much. And I think you raise an excellent question is how much is too much? And the importance as therapists that we just, like, okay, I have this book of different, like you may be excited. Okay, divorce, here are all the interventions, but like recognizing, okay, we have to know the parents, know their limitations, know that piece of it. I mean, I love parenting piece. I'm an advanced nurtured heart approach trainer, as well as putting in a lot of different pieces. So I try to work with parents at least every 3 to 4 sessions. So I am such an advocate of the parenting piece that we will talk about that. And we will talk about, well, is this book a good idea? Is this book not a good idea? And we work together because we're a team. They may see me as the expert, but I need to also understand, are they going to be able to tolerate it? Because if they can't, kids, Howard Glasser of the Nurtured Heart Approach will say children read energy like Braille, right? So if we know that, then that is a time when you said, oh, would you just read it without the parent in the room? And maybe that would be a time where if they've established if I'm their safe person and that parent or caregiver is not their safe person yet,
Mm,
what
mm,
are the things? And maybe we'll read it. And then with the parent, just mention the book and
mhm.
maybe highlight something about it without actually reading it. So we still want to be a bridge in some way of sharing the experience of whatever feels safe for the child.
Yeah. Okay, what about the kids that they don't like books?
Yeah.
Okay, actually let me bring this I've got a question, Tammy. What if we have a kid, because you said in your vulnerable share that reading has been challenging for you as a journey. So what
Yes.
if we don't know that as a therapist? Or what if I don't know, what if there is a trauma that has been associated with books or with reading, or a child associates books with school in some way and like mastery of something, or who knows, right? What do
Yeah.
we do with those kids that are like, uh-uh, that is such a trigger for me to go towards a book?
Right. I think we sit with that and we recognize it and we're curious about it because there's a reason. There's a reason why they're shutting down with books. There's a reason why the books are dysregulating them. And I'm just curious as to why. And maybe like little bits, and maybe, even in terms of talking to the parents and school and just recognizing what other things, but it's just being curious. But never, I mean, never would, I mean, yeah, books, books were anxiety, held a lot of anxiety. Certain books still do hold anxiety. So I think that if it's getting lost in the words, I mean, these books, it's not just the words, it's the illustrations and the imagery, right? Like, let's just take a moment. We know the power of imagery. And to just be looking at the imagery of these books without using the words and just seeing what comes up and being curious with that without even needing to go with the words. And we're just meeting them where they are because these pictures are amazing. And it's so amazing if we think of imagery and we think of sand tray or we think of art or any of these things, when kids are looking at these pictures, what they're seeing that we don't see is so cool and amazing and enlightening, and just sitting with that. But I think in general, if books are creating any type of anxiety, we certainly have plenty of tools. We don't need to use them. So I think that's really important, that if a kid doesn't like sand, like, we're not going to use sand. We're going to use other things, and maybe one day they'll go to it and maybe they won't, and it's fine. Like, we have to let go. And I think that it's hard, and especially I think for new therapists starting off and in general, that we do have certain agendas. And if we work so hard on our own agenda, one of the things in the bibliotherapy toolbox, when we go through a little bit in terms of being curious or asking questions about the characters, how can we stop and reset ourselves of like, okay, is this question for our own agenda? Is it because we need all this information because we have a parent meeting on Friday and we want to get the really good, juicy stuff? Or can we just take a step back and recognize, okay, what is in the best interest of the child? And it's not about us trying to get information or learn more or get a really good answer from the child that we could then tell the parent we had this major breakthrough. And just stepping away from this agenda we think we may have, then just being with instead of being, this doing instead of not doing, but being.
Okay, so Tammi, you just threw out another paradigm shift, I think,
Okay.
for many of our listeners potentially, which is this idea that you can use a book and never read the words. Right? I mean, really, you know,
Yeah.
we're conditioned. There's a book, it's got words, you read the words. That's what you do with a book. But even to let that go and go, no, it's use it as imagery, use it as an invitation to explore the pictures, the oh my goodness. Yes.
And if they don't want to use the book for that, let them use it to balance it on their heads and watch the thing tarot.
Or
We're play
to
therapists.
build forts with the books. Whatever. Yeah,
Do
exactly.
whatever you want with it, right? But we're trusting the process that they're going to do whatever they want to do with it. There's an amazing book that Lisa Remy, just real briefly, it's called ICIC by Henderson, and it's so cool. It's, when you look at it, it's different perspectives. So the parent will be like, I see thumbs up. The child's like, I see thumbs down. I see left. I see right. I see sky. And it's such a great book because you're back and forth, and then you turn the book around. So it's so beautiful with the relationship. And then what Lisa's prompt in this book is, and I just did it the other day with mine because I love it, of just creating, like with model magic or whatever. And she created something, and then mom came in and we're like, oh, what do you see? And then we turned it around, and we just had so much fun of just perspectives and being able to look at perspectives as a way that's teaching it, but it's fun and it's playful, and like, we all have different perspectives, and we have to go through that every day, understanding the different perspectives of others.
That's so good, Tammi. So, Tammi, will you share with our listeners a little bit about your book that came out?
Sure. So, I mean, those of you in the play therapy community, we have a lot of amazing contributors. And really, I reached out to many play therapy contributors, and I'm like, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite technique? What's your favorite intervention? And this book also really came out of, for years, everybody would ask me, because they knew I love bibliotherapy. Okay, Tammi, what's the best book on divorce? What's the best book on trauma? What's the best book on bullying? And so I started to create a list. And then Basically, this is also a resource of, I mean, if you look for a book on from diversity, from inclusion, from any of these things, so whatever it is, whatever the topic is, you'll then get a whole list of books, like recommended books that I know, and then you'll have materials that are recommended for the playroom, for those things, and then different interventions. And let me say that in terms of these books, that there are so many books out there. I mean, like keep adding books. I'm like, how could I miss this one? How could I have missed that one? And recognizing that you don't have to buy the book. You can have a different book and recognize that some of these interventions will also work fine. You can preview any book, although we want to support our authors. You can preview any book online and do it, see a video of it and do the video with them. But I really encourage people to find books and use books and share with me, because I mean, there's just a million. I mean, every single day people keep introducing different books, and I'm like, I wish they were all in here. You can only do so many, but really, I hope that this is an amazing resource for school counselors and for parents. The other day it wasn't one of my clients, it was a different client. And I peeked in and my book was in the waiting room, and I saw this mom taking pictures of every page and then just taking notes, because parents want resources. And I think using for parents to be able to use books with their children, how beautiful, because we don't have the words, and parents need to be encouraged to have these books as co-regulators to create connection at home and to be able to read, and that it doesn't just have to be in the therapy room.
So good. And I'm imagining Amazon, all of your typical places where you can get books.
Amazon, Pessy, Self-Esteem Shop, anywhere where books are sold, you'll have it, and it's just a great resource. And what I love so much about the majority of the interventions and the contributors they feel very bottom up. Like there are these beautiful books, and the interventions really do have this beautiful connectedness with it that don't feel so top down as well. So I just hope it's going to be, a great resource for others, and hopefully it will encourage people to grow their own books and things that they've never even thought about. And it makes our job a little bit easier, because it gives us different words and different creative ways to be able to use it. As Jessica Stone says, like digital play therapy, it's just another tool.
Remind us of the title again of the book.
The Bibliotherapy Toolbox: 100 plus creative and playful story-based interventions to help kids create safety, overcome challenges, and build resiliency. It's a mouthful. And, I love sand trays. So there are a lot of sand tray interventions in there. There's adaptations for telehealth. So there's just a lot of good stuff. And I just hope it's going to be a resource. And most importantly, that co-regulator to, again, just to create the beautiful relationship we want with our clients. We want our clients to have with the caregivers and parents, and just, the beauty of that piece of it and how important that is.
Well, Tammi, in my Center Play Therapy certification program, I always have my recommended list of resources for different categories, and your book is going on my list for the program. So thank you so much for creating a resource that was very needed. It was genuinely missing in our field. So thank you so much for creating that for all of us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you so much for just having me here and letting me share all my passions. As you know, I'm very passionate about
I
all
love
of
it.
this stuff.
It's so contagious. A couple more things for our listeners. Listeners, reminder, go check out her TEDx talk on her work with sand trays. And as listeners, as you can tell, she's a very passionate presenter. And so if you like Tammi to present. If you have an organization, if you have connections to an organization and you want her to come train, I know Tammi is open to doing so virtually and in person. Tammi, any last words for our listeners?
Well, what I would say in terms of with trainings and those pieces, I do have on Jen Taylor on hers. I have two webinars, one on sand tray therapy, a 3 hour, and one on sand tray therapy using it for supervision. Supervision's one of my passions. So if anybody is interested in supervision, I love to do supervision, and I do 12-hour in person. Well, they've been in person and online coming up, and I have Vegas coming up, the first Las Vegas Child Therapy Symposium in September that super excited about. And in April at Mago Sedona, which is the most beautiful retreat. I did a 5-day play therapy retreat last year in April after me begging for many years. Pessy is having me do 5-day retreat in beautiful Mago Sedona, all on sand tray. So I am very excited about that. So, I have my Instagram page, and maybe we could link that, and my Facebook page. And I just love to share resources, and my YouTube channel. So just ways to share my passion with others. And I just really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to chat and share all the things that I love.
Well, like I said at the very beginning, it's a long time coming, and you're finally here on this on this podcast. So I'm so grateful, and thank you, Tammi, for all you are doing, all you have done for us and for kids and for families, and you're such a treasure. So,
Thank you. Back at you. Thanks, Lisa.
yeah. All right, listeners. I hope that was inspiring, paradigm shifting in some way. Get you thinking, get you excited. Go find some books, everyone. Think about the books that were your favorite when you were little. Why were they your favorite books?
Exactly. And bring them back in.
And
Exactly.
bring it back in. And wherever you are in the world, whatever is happening for you, to you, take care of yourselves. You are important, the most important toy in the playroom. Until next time, everyone.